I started seeing this book in the background of many YouTubers and Instagram beatmakers videos. And around the time of its launch, like many others, I was so excited to read it. But it did get me thinking, is this going to change the way I produce and listen to music? The positive reviews for this book really do speak for themselves. It's probably up there with one of the best music biographies that I've ever read, and the author does a fantastic job of capturing the blood, sweat, and tears of Jay Dilla's life. You find out all the things you did and didn't want to know with this book, and none of the technical information is glossed over or dumbed down, and it really is fantastic. A quickie review would be that if you enjoy everything that surrounds hip-hop culture, you're a producer and especially a fan of Jay Dilla, you're going to love this book, really. However, when I did complete this read, I didn't feel like I came away with any newfound technique that I was missing in my production workflow. I wanted to give you a rundown of my favorite musical reads and books that genuinely did get me to either think about music differently or really did level up my production skills. Let's dive into it. Books are expensive, and this is by far the most expensive read in the entire list. However, if you're only going to spend your hard-earned cash on one thing, make your investment here. This is Mixing with Impacts, learning to make musical choices. I have absolutely loved this book, and it's become a kind of safety blanket in the studio space. This version is filled with highlighter marks, post-it notes, little ideas that I've jotted down for things that I need to remember when I jump back into the DAW. This book really does cover everything from the fundamentals of panning and leveling, mixing your music, adding effects and what they're for, and it does it in a really concise yet refreshing way that doesn't feel like you're going back to school once again. But it also covers the importance of acoustic treatment, generating different spatial reflections in the box. There's different ways of compressing noted here, and advanced techniques too, like binaural 3D mixing, the importance of understanding undertones and overtones, how they can harm your mix or benefit your mix. I've got some personal favorite paragraphs. There's this one on decisive action inside mindset, and another part on the drowning out effect, which I found personally really helpful as well. I can't say enough good things about this book. It feels like an ad read, but I promise you, if you apply these techniques, it will 100% level up your production workflow. You just got to try it out. Simple as. The next book in this list is How Music Works by David Byrne. David Byrne breaks down in stupendous detail the epicenter of music recording and performance, and gives the reader an insight to the stark realities of why certain sounds and genres were born. In the opening paragraphs, Byrne nails how we like to think of composers, tables covered with sheet music, or a rock and roll musician, kind of drugged out, and creates this perfect 3-minute piece of music. But he goes into wonderful locale detail as to why those particular genres worked in a particular type of space, which was really fascinating and had me hooked from the go. This book covers everything from genres to geographical locations, and even the evolution of digital technology from analog and how it affected the music of the modern era. He breaks down record labels and the problems with them and then without them, and then furthermore licensing, royalties, and distribution. This is a person that is well versed in touring, record labels, music performance. If you don't know David Byrne, get to know. There's plenty of history in this one, but if you start to break down the timeline and understand which parts of the puzzle are missing from your personal musical experience, you can better fill in the gaps to the trends surrounding music and where things are heading. And that's the thing that I find really interesting. It's a nice one to do your homework to post-reading. The next book in this list is Perfecting Sound Forever, The Story of Recorded Music by Greg Milner. Now, this one's a little bit of a harder read, and it's definitely for the audiophiles out there. If you're a bit of a studio dweller, then this one will be right up your street. It isn't without some of its shortcomings. It's fairly obvious to me where the author's tastes and opinions lie. There's a little bit of that old rock musicians are the true savants of this art. However, Milner does a fantastic job of getting you to listen to music differently, and that is worth its weight in gold. Over the course of like 300 pages or so, it's so evident how passionate this author is about music, distribution, how it's recorded, and just sound as a whole. It is actually inside those tougher to read chapters where you start to appreciate the evolution that music has taken, from live recordings to multi-track, and then the introduction to tape and CD. And now we're at a place of endless MIDI ideas and overcompressed, possibly lifeless music. My wrap-up review for this would be that it's great for all music producers because you dive into the mind of a music fan and audiophiles. You get a really well-rounded picture of the things you want to aim for, especially if you're donning the cap of a mixing and master engineer, which are keeping production costs down as well. I should actually go into a few honorable mentions as well, because there's a few that come to mind that just didn't make this list. They're kind of person specific, but the first would be for all my lo-fi fiends and crate diggers out there. There's a book called How to Listen to Jazz. I forget the author, but I'll throw it up on screen now. How to Listen to Jazz is a phenomenal read, and it's especially good if you're into your sample-based music and you're quite often looking for those jazz records to sample. This is something that's going to help you appreciate jazz and dive deeper into the subgenres that you enjoy, especially if you're not that familiar. It's the book that I would suggest to anybody that says jazz is just random noise. It is filled with musical reference material. My favorite thing to do is to find those 5 tracks from each chapter, make a playlist in Spotify, and kind of have that music on in the background as you read through it. It really does give you kind of a new or deeper understanding of the subgenres. There's a really great coffee table book called The Rest is Just Noise. It's a huge, thick encyclopedic read looking at the modern classical music of the 20th century and how the events of the 1900s affected that music. It's not going to shake up your world or anything, but it's a fantastic book to dip in and out of whilst you're having your morning coffee. And it's one of those books where you can kind of exchange facts with your musical friend and kind of just enlighten their day a little bit. I also found this at my local bookshop as well. It's called The Mental Game of Electronic Music Producers. Again, this isn't going to be something that's going to change your world if you're a well-versed music producer and you've been doing it for many years. But if you're just diving into music production or you struggle to finish songs, this is definitely a great read that will give you an overview of all of the basics, and some of the methods of finishing songs and ways to go about your workflow are actually really helpful. So that's my list, guys. I haven't really spoken about a book that underlines the perfect way to distribute your music, but that's just because you can read the DistroKid FAQ, today's sponsor. I've recently been whitelisting some of the music that I've released that you've also seen in my music tutorials. Sometimes it's important not to get your own music copyright striked on yourself, and they have this really handy tool called the YouTube allow list. It's perfect if you also put music videos out or do tutorials of your music that is released. I couldn't recommend DistroKid more. And if you want to get 7% off your first year, just use the link in the description below. Okay, it's that time. I hope I'm not going to catch any flack for this. Like I said, I am a fan of Dilla and this book. The author did a terrific job. But my one tiny criticism would be that the book is filled with supposedly helpful music graphs throughout, but they're ever changing. And it's like the author intentionally created these to confuse the reader and make Dilla out to be this godlike Marvel character, like Neo inside the Matrix, that could just hear, breathe, smell, and see music differently to everybody else. And I'm not trying to badmouth the life and hard work that Jay Dilla put in. I just feel like there was an easier, more simplistic way to visualize things like swung rhythms and micro chopping of samples. Stuff like this seemed a little bit strange, but that's just my thoughts. What are yours? Have you read Dilla Time? And what are your most iconic music reads? What was most helpful? This is just a small list of my favorites, and I'm sure there's a huge roster of books that I've forgotten. So please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for stopping by. My name's Will. I make an assortment of music under the moniker Hush Child, and I'll see you guys next time.